Well, thank you all so much for letting me join you today. And it's always great fun to be on a campus, you know. It reminds me, though, how mature I'm getting. When you go up and down these hills, whew, boy, a challenge to somebody's out of shape. And Mary Ellen, she's so in shape. So anyway. But well, this evening, we're going to actually do this in two parts. I am going to do relational marketing, and she is going to do social networking. So we'll both have to be kind of speedy. I feel like a locomotion is going to be really going fast. So really hang on to your socks. And she is going to be posting this later for you all for the notes and everything. But anyway, what we're going to do is in my section, I'm actually going to have two divisions. I'm going to do the operational part first, which is a lot of just the basics. And I know you all have already been going through some of this, so this is going to be a little bit maybe rerun, but that's always good. And the second part is going to be called the personal. It's called the Power Edge. And it's kind of my own little trademark thing that I'm calling this because it's something that I have keyed on and zeroed in on, and I believe that's one of the reasons I've been very successful. My last job that I worked for, Kingsway Charities in Bristol, Virginia, I don't know if any of you have heard of it or not, but it was founded by John Gregory, who founded King Pharmaceuticals. And in the first year that I was there, they only had about 4 major corporate donors. When I left in 2009, 2 years ago now, that we had 64 consistent giving donors. So we grew tremendously, and my biggest year was in, I think, year 4 or 5, and we brought in about $424 million worth of medicines. My job was primarily targeting the medical industry because I provided the medicines and medical supplies to medical mission teams that went throughout the world. So that was my last job. So I speak from a lot of experience. I've been into the nonprofit world for about 15 years now, and more than that actually, about 15 actual working years. And it's been an exciting, interesting time. So what we're going to do now is talk about the foundation. Okay, the foundation is the most important thing. I was a co-owner of a construction company for about 10 years, and during that time, one thing we learned is you always had to have a great base. When you're pouring concrete or doing asphalt, you got to make sure that that base is perfect, or you are going to have real problems. And the same way in a nonprofit world, I found that it is crucial that you establish a great base when you get in there. Now again, I'm just going to kind of give you the nuts and bolts of everything. We're not going to go into detail on these things. We're just going to go over overview primarily. But the base on which we need to establish everything is first begins with strategic planning and development. You've got to have a strong strategic planning and development program. That will be the nuts and bolts of your job. To be above the norm, your base also should have this Power Edge philosophy, which we're going to talk about today later. And in your relational marketing, it is key that you implement it in every aspect if you want to see yourself very successful. You need to have objectives, you need to have goals, and you need to build a powerful infrastructure. Now, infrastructure comes primarily about as you are starting to meet people and individuals and companies and organizations when you first start working for your organization. And this is even can be applied, these principles can be applied to a company as well. But when you're there, you start making these contacts, and you want to build a solid infrastructure because down the road, you're going to shape these different infrastructures to help you to be able to enhance your organization. And like I said, I would love just to be able to camp there for a while and talk about that because that is a powerful thing, but that's not the goal today. But next is to establish a solidarity of relationships. You want to be able, with your coworkers and with your donors and with your vendors, to have a camaraderie and have a loyalty and have harmony that creates a unity and a unified team and spirit. Because then that brings a loyalty there that when you need to call in the chips, so to speak, those people are going to be there to help you. Now the next one is our business plan. I'm not going to really dwell on the business plan too much because obviously that's another class that you all would have, but I do want to make a comment here. You always want to design your strategy and develop your plan with relationships always in mind. I can't emphasize that enough, okay, because relationships is about relationships, it's about people. It's not about the mechanics, okay? Even though we have to have the mechanics to make things happen, it's not about the mechanics. As you draft your goals and objectives, you want to intertwine them so that you, your organization, and your donor are all in the framework when you do your strategic planning and development. What you want to do here is explore for the potential. And when you first get into your job, first of all, you want to do an overview of what's already existing. Like I said, when I went to Kingsway, and I'm going to use them a lot since it was the last place I was, but they only had 4 corporate donors. So right away I go, okay, I've got to sit down here and develop a strategy that's going to allow me to, number 1, get more donors, number 2, get consistent donors, because I noticed a lot of these were giving but like once or twice a year, and number 3, to build up a group of nonprofits that I could interact with as well, because I found from other jobs I had that was very successful, that's how I built my infrastructure, was utilizing other nonprofits, because a lot of nonprofits, they bring in donations that they can't use, and they have to find a place where they can place their goods and their product. Now, obviously, what I was in more was in GIK, which is gift in kind. That's primarily what I did at Kingsway rather than money. But at Good News Ministries, I was in both aspects. So you'll hear me kind of talking more about the GIK. Okay, the type of relationships then what we're looking for will be obviously your donor and the funder. These are people that write grants and all that good stuff. And then your networking. This is a relationship. It's pretty ambiguous, but it is a relationship. And then you look at your faith-based organizations and then your secular organizations. Your business types, and there's many different kinds. I only wrote down a couple here. Your local family-owned businesses, your chain stores, your corporates. They all are different. You have to treat everyone completely different. The background that you're going to need to look for in these different organizations is what is their status if they're among the corporate world. What's their status in community? What's their community involvement? These are all key decisions that will make you decide and help you to decide if you really want to pursue this company, this individual, this owner to be a donor. What's their relationship with Wall Street? And when I did a workshop one time not too long ago, I was talking about some of the different magazines, which we won't touch on that today, but periodicals and things that you know to read. And I mentioned about the Wall Street, and this guy said to me afterwards, well, why in the world would I want to read Wall Street? And I said, you need to know the heartbeat of any corporation you're going to deal with. Even if you're going to their foundation part, you need to know the heartbeat, where they are, what's going on in their company at that time. And just because it's a business in your community, and just because they say they do some of the things and fund some of the things that you're interested in, does not necessarily mean it's a good fit. So that's why it's so important for you to really study and look at their criteria. Okay, now the next thing is we're going to examine, after we got all this information, all these materials we've studied on, we're going to assess the information. This is how it's going to hone it down to, okay, is this applicable to us and what we're going to do in our job. The need of the donor is primary. But when we're looking for this donor and we want to know that's going to be a good fit, we have to look at what is their PR, what's their public relations. And we're going to see if they had any press or if it's been bad press or positive press. And again, I can't tell you how many times that's really helped me out, because when I see a company that's having bad press, it's a great time to go in and offer some good PR. Especially if you're in an organization like when I was with Good News Ministries, they had a men's homeless shelter, family shelter, a youth center, and so there was enough variety there that I could offer them something that would give them good PR and good press. So that's one key reason why it's really very important to stay up with your local businesses and your national businesses and now your global businesses. Also, you need to look at issues, their ethics, their reputation, their publicity, etc. Look at their strengths and their weaknesses. And look at their community relations. Are they new to the community? Are they just building? Have they just gone through a merger? Or have they split? Look at the employee concerns. Now you say, well, why does this matter? Here's a good illustration on the employee concerns with their mergers and acquisitions and these type of things. I went to Toledo one time and went up to the door, and I saw a gentleman standing there, and flown in to have a meeting with him and his managers, and he didn't even let me come in. He actually came outside with me. He says, I am so sorry to tell you this because I flew all the way up there just to meet him. He says, but I just finished a meeting with our whole staff, our building. There was probably about 300 or 400 employees. And he said, I just had to tell them we're closing down our facilities. I just found out about 48 hours ago. And he was so shaken and he was so disturbed. I mean, he was about 6'3", 6'4", a big guy. And he was, I mean, tears were dropping down his cheeks because they all had been long-term employees, very committed to this company. And at that moment, I realized, and this is what I'm going to be talking about more here in a minute, so the relational, it no longer mattered about this company because they're not going to be able to help me, right? And it doesn't really matter about me, even though I traveled, several hours to get there by plane to see him. It mattered about him and those 400 employees that he had to deal with. And so I took the next 10 minutes to encourage him and to give him some words of wisdom and insight. And actually, before I left, we both gave each other a hug. And I've never met the guy before. But he said, I appreciate everything you said and taking this time to spend with me. And that's what it's about, is about relationships. And he actually was a part of a chain of companies. And so he did pass along my visit there to someone else that allowed me to get another donor as a result of that visit. So even though I didn't get a visit from him, they did not get a donation from him, I did get an inroad and a door into someplace else. Also, always look at the employee relations and their attitude towards humanitarian activities, because not all companies are pro-humanitarian aid. Okay, next one. Now I have two pictures here of Hurricane Katrina, and of course we all know about that. And it was a big thing with nonprofits. But again, as I say here, you make the match. Not all donors are the same. Surprisingly, during that time, some donors did not want to give because that was not their thing. The reason why, you have different kinds of donors, and I'm going to list them off here. You have the one-time donor, giver, usually that's it, one time. They come in, they're usually somebody that helps in capital campaigns, or they'll help in some big project. They maybe give you $1 million, $50,000, but that's it. You'll never hear from them again. You can keep contact with them. Then you have your project-oriented persons that love fundraising events. They like capital campaigns and save the polar bears. Then you have your soft and fuzzies, and that's the people that usually go for Hurricane Katrinas and these type of things. And your crisis and tragedy events donors and givers. Because these people want to feel good. I don't know how many of you have been watching that program, The Millionaire, The Secret Millionaire. Very interesting program. Because you're visiting nonprofits. So if you're really interested in nonprofits, you really should watch that program. It really just gives you a snippet of what the nonprofit world is doing in so many different areas. But it's all about, once they get in there, they realize it touches their heart. So they get the warm and fuzzy thing. And of course, you've got your monthly, your quarterly, and your annual donor. Now, the crucial thing is the next one is the moment it's yours. It's just contact. When you go up, you either knock on the door or you go into the person's office, you go into the boardroom, and you now have your personal face-to-face visit. And this is where now it all starts to begin on the relationship, on the relational building, okay? In the boardroom, your first thing should always be to say to them, and this is what I did, and this is what made me totally different from anybody else, is I would sit there, we do the little intros and everything, then I would say, how can I help you today to make money or save money? And almost everybody was totally shocked. I mean, I could almost sometimes count the silence. It would be a couple of minutes before anybody could speak. Because most nonprofits are going there with a handout. And they're so about me or so about the organization or our projects or who we're helping that they forgot to think about them. Now, going back to those years when I was a contractor then, and I realized the value of a business, you need to make money. You have to make money in order to be able to give. And so I wanted that company to know that my first and foremost, and I used to tell many of them after we have a relationship going, I'd say, you know what? It doesn't do you any good, or I as a consumer, if you go belly up. So I want to do everything to help you to be successful. And so many times we would sit down and look at different plans that they have, whether it was their PR plan or whether it was their marketing plan or whatever it was, to see how we could tailor things. I've got some examples here, if we want to skip those. So anyway, then also when you're in those meetings, make sure that you target the people as an individual, whoever's in the room there with you, whether it's one person or whether you got two people or whether you have a room full. The most intimidating situation I found myself in was down at Triangle Research Park with a Japanese company. Of course, right away it was intimidating when I walked in, all the little furniture down on the floor, you know. And but I had done my homework. I had read up on them, read Wall Street, read the drugs they were working with, and had my homework all behind me. So that part, you know, I was pretty good with. But when I walked into the conference room, and there was about 21 people there, and out of those people, 7 of them were attorneys. Now that was quite intimidating. And that was because they were very serious about confidentiality and the possibility of their drugs being into other people's hands and being misused. Now that wasn't a first time, it was the first time so many attorneys, but that in the particular industry that I worked with was very huge on confidentiality. And that is so huge when you start selling yourself, and that's what we're going to talk about now here next. We're going to look at several things here. Now we've gotten kind of through the process and we're getting ready to transition over now to the personal, to the relational. We talked about everything in general as far as just the general things that you have to do, and we're wrapping that up now. You've got to strategize, look for different and unique ways to take yourself to the desired goals, reinforce your objectives, and keep yourself mentally proactive. It is really easy if you're going to be a 24/7 person in the nonprofit world to get burned out. So you have to keep yourself very mentally proactive in your routine, into your follow-up, into all the criteria you've set yourself. And then benchmark your products and your projects and develop your plan often. Make sure you always go back over that. Okay, juggling relationships then isn't easy. I would say 70 to 80% of my time was spent on relationship building. The other percentage, 20, 25%, was spent on marketing and PR and doing reports and that type of thing. That's how important what we're getting ready to talk about is in the nonprofit sector. If you're working in development and if you're working in the strategy or planning, any of that type of thing, that is so key. One of the things when you're working with donors, make sure you're very punctual when making conference calls, return requests, whatever that is relating one-on-one, make sure you're always punctual. I can't stress this enough when you start working with corporations especially, because usually my initial visits were always with CEOs or presidents or vice presidents, and then after that I would be meeting with mid-management. But usually I started out with either senior management or higher. And I can remember one time the most crucial situation that to see a guy, he told me when I set up the appointment in Tampa, Florida, he said, I only have a few minutes. He said, so you can't be late. I mean, he even stressed that even before he even knew me. I said, no problem. Well, my plane got delayed here in Bristol because of thunderstorms. And I wound up getting in Tampa, Florida late, but still early before the appointment. I allowed for that. But the problem was, by the time I got the rental car and got there and everything, I was like right on the money when I walked through the door. And by the time I got back to his office, I was already like 2 or 3 minutes past the time I was supposed to meet with him. When I walked through the door, he said, I have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes to tell me what you want. So I was very prepared when I walked in there, but I'll tell you one thing, preparation was the key, but you know what I spent most of my time on? Was relationship. Took 3 minutes to really get to know that guy and enhance the relationship between he and I, and then did my prep with the thing when I was going in for the ask. I did that. I didn't really go for the ask, and then I waited until I got back to the office, and then I sent him a package with some different things. He happened to be a collector of some stuff, so I bought a couple things that I knew that he collected, and then I put a letter in there, about 2 or 3 paragraphs, short, and did my ask. And he did wind up giving to us a substantial sum because I had respected his time. He put it out there, he gave me the guidelines, he told me what the expectations were, and that I met them. The other thing too, which I have a big complaint about in the business world in general, is people returning their phone calls. Listen folks, that is huge, and when you're working with a $1 million, multi-million-dollar donor or a $2 donor, you need to return phone calls. It's respect. And people respond when you respect them. When you respect their time, like I did with that gentleman, or you respect their money or their efforts, when they're volunteers, you have to respect their time, and you've got to return their phone calls. If you're unable to keep a commitment, acknowledge the fact and set the limits. Also, helpfulness is a great key in relationship building. Just because maybe being really personal and chummy with somebody isn't your thing, doesn't mean that customer relations doesn't exist for that donor. Adjust to the circumstances of your donor and or the relationship that you have with the company in general. Good illustration of this is when I was working up in Indianapolis with an organization. Frito-Lay was one donor I really wanted to get. And we had a youth program, and so obviously their product would be great for a youth program plus some other things. And I had tried a couple times and just got nowhere with it. So one day, one of the managers actually let me come in and talk to him. He said, you know, you really need to talk to my boss. And fortunate for me, his boss was there, so I went to talk to him. And as we talked, I found that they had a real problem. The reason why they didn't really trust nonprofits was because he had worked with another nonprofit, in fact, one across the United States, I won't mention their name, but they were not good in their follow-up and picking up the product. And he said it would sit on our docks and it wound up costing us money. And he says, it's one thing to be giving away a product, but now you're costing us money too. He said, that's just not good business. And of course, that's one of our selling points is, you know, we get it off your floor so it doesn't, you know, cost you money in your racks. So right away I said to him, I said, you know what, how about if we got a trailer, brought the trailer in, you could back it up anytime to your dock, put your product on there when you want to, back it, take it back out to the yard, bring it back up, back and forth, back and forth. He loved the idea. And as a result of that, from then on, he was very consistent, and they became one of our top donors. Because I looked at the situation that they had that was negative for him, and why he had a negative attitude to nonprofits, and fixed the situation so it accommodated him. So make sure you always are accommodating to your donor. Be flexible and be loyal, respect the persons, and attitude is everything. A positive attitude. Put a smile on your face. I always tell people, when you're on the phone, smile. Because when you're talking on the phone, you're smiling, do you realize it makes your spirits happier? It makes you enthusiastic. So attitude is everything. And last of all, on this section here, donors really like to test you. They like to test your loyalty. They like to test who you really are as a person. And then they also like to test your organization as well. They really want to know, is this organization really doing what they're saying they're going to do? Now, we're going into my part that I really love, and I think is what is key and crucial to being the different norm of the standard. And that's what I call the power edge of relational marketing. It's the pivotal point of relational development that makes an organization unique and special. First of all, you have to always have the mentality that the donor is first. When I went to Kingsway, that was probably one of the hardest things, and it was not my management, it was my counterparts in distribution. And since then I've talked to other organizations say they have the same problem with distribution in their companies or organizations, is that they could not understand why the donor always was no wrong. Well, why are you treating the donor like that? What's going on here, you know? And they would be really upset that they were getting all this priority. And I said, well, without the donor, your organization, our organization, wouldn't exist. So remember that the donor is always first. Number two, always emphasis on service. And that is, I know for a fact, and not even think, I know for a fact, is what made me successful with Kingsway and Lighthouse Ministries and Good News Ministries. Because I found out what was the key elements out there in the marketplace that was creating and resentments and frustrations with nonprofits and the corporations or donors, the lack of service. And so if it was trucking, I would provide trucking. If it was timely trucking, I made sure I guaranteed trucking would be there within 24 hours. If it was a matter of like the Frito-Lays, then I accommodated that way. But I made sure that they always got excellent service. They also work on the continuity of the bond between donor and yourself, because they associate your organization with you. You have to have good character and good integrity. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Also, acquaint yourself with your donors' concerns and fears and complaints. The more you get to know them in an intimate way, and that's one of the questions I do ask, is how far do we take that personal relationship? How far do we go from business to personal? Now, in relational marketing, we ask ourselves then this. If we're going to get on that level where it's a one-on-one between us and the donor, the funder, we ask ourselves this. What is my uniqueness of my past that helps me in my understanding with the donor? In my case, being in business for myself and being a co-owner of a business, I could understand the need to make money. I could understand the need to be profitable. And so I would gear my pitch to that whole thought mentality. So when I went to the boardroom, I'd say, how can we help you make money or save money? Number two, my ask will come in the form of a help offer. I'm here today to see how I can help you. It's not necessarily that I'm wanting money, it's how can I help you? Getting their product out of their facility so it doesn't cost them money, helps them to save money from destruction. In other words, you look at all the things, you've done all of your studying, you read your Wall Street, you read your business journals, you've done all that and done your study on this company so that you know where their weaknesses or the frustrations or the hurts are. And you go in for that particular part to be able to help them. So you're prepared ahead of time. And not always that first time do you want to be ready to do an ask. Sometimes that's a turn-off and you won't get any results from it. So you have to go with that body instinct. Okay, what recent events? This is another question you'd ask yourself. What recent events from your relationships, positions, and knowledge helps you to move forward with this company? And again, just because you've done your homework on it, you'll understand and you know what you need to look for. And always ask yourself, what if this were me? Would I want to be treated this way? Or how would I think about it if I had a stranger come in here today, especially when you're doing individual donors, personal donors, and you go into somebody like John Gregory, and you say to John, hey, I'd like to have $200 million for XYZ project. Well, you better have done your homework on John Gregory because he's very specific on what he gives to. Always be professional and personalize your visit with a donor. And ask yourself, are you a good listener? Do you totally get engaged in the conversation? Or are you busy thinking about that date you're going to have, or going out to eat with some friends, or you're going to go see a football game, or you're worried about your finances? When you go in there, you have to be totally committed to that conversation. That person sitting across from you, or persons, are totally engaged in your conversation and you with them. There are industry standards and expectations when it comes to donors and recipients. And so you need to be sure you read up on that. And there's some good websites, especially the government has a website to know what kind of gifts and things you can accept because there's ethics involved in that. Okay, and now we're going to look at marketing yourself. Now, Mary Ellen is going to go into the social marketing, but we're just going to talk about a couple words here that help you to know, because what I'm talking about now, this power edge, is you, yourself. You really are marketing yourself because you are representing yourself and you're representing the organization that you're there for. So they're looking at you. Who are you? Are you a nobody or are you a somebody? When you walk into that room, there's several things that you want to put down into their minds and hearts when you leave that day. Because here's what's at stake: confidentiality, integrity, ethics, honesty, loyalty, values, and morality. And if you can't say I can agree with these, then don't go into the nonprofit world. We have seen what has gone and happened to organizations, big ones. Red Cross a few years ago with the World Trade Center, when when the towers went down. They had a lot of bad press because of mismanagement of money. And that's a big organization. I could rattle off, and I do have actually notes down here, but I'm not going to say them today. But, you know, I can name off organizations I worked with that wound up getting in trouble. And because they were did not have these values. So you make sure if this is something you want to get into, these are values that you can adhere to. And then know the different personalities of people that you're working with. Are they needy, independent, social, need recognition? And always expand your relationships. Make sure your relationships are not limited to just your donor. Make sure that they are always seeking, your relationships are always seeking for those who will allow you to diversify. That's what you want. You always want to be diverse. You want to always be allowing yourself to diverse. Now on personalize, we're looking here at personalization while maintaining professionalism. Just real quick, I want to say here, how far do we go on personalization? Well, this is why you need to do your research and your homework. Number one, with your organization that you're connected with. And also go to websites like the government website and these places, because they will also tell you what your expectations are of the government. And then establish and know your boundaries. How personal do I become, and what methods do I use? Personal or social media. Always be sure you give thanks. And then I want to finish out here with two more things. And nurturing ownership. Nurturing is the key to all relationships. It's great when you go in and get that big buck the first time around, but if you do not nurture them, if you do not show that you care, if you do not become their friend, if there's no loyalty built there, you will not keep that donor. There's too much competition out there right now. Nurturing relationships mean being proactive in every aspect, face-to-face, verbal, written word, and electronic communications. Nurturing relationships takes ownership for misunderstanding, for flaws, imperfection, and correct choices and poor communication. You are a human being. Your organization is human. So your donor is going to understand that, but always own up to it. Nurture for stability. Nurture to increase donation amount and frequency. That's your goal. You don't want to just always stay at one level. You want to take them forward. Nurture to increase your leverage for requesting help. Because there might come a day, and this happened many times, I may start out with a donor that maybe gave you 20 bucks. Then I moved them up to 100, maybe 200. And then they wound up donating something huge, you know, like a truck or a whole bunch of computers for computer lab. And it started out with a $20 donor. So you keep nurturing that donor to take them to different levels. And always have healthy communications. Nurture them for that. Nurture them for that loyalty. And nurture teamwork. I can't express that enough. It is not about you, and it's not just about you and your organization. It's about a team. Without volunteers, without the donors and the funders, you wouldn't have a successful program. It's all about teamwork. And last of all, you need to respect your relationships. Value their gift no matter the amount of the size. They are the most important person in your world and your organization's world. Limit your intrusion into their life. Be careful, be wise in coming into their life. Value their time. All time is precious, yours and theirs. And respect their privacy, confidentiality. Know them as a person and those surrounding them. Communicate your care and concern for them and the company. Understand, always understand their expectations. And the best reward for the donor is the organization's fulfilling its mission and using the donor's gift wisely and fruitfully. And last of all, you want to expand your relationships, your objectives, and your goals. Networking, initiating a mentoring process. I can't tell you how important that is, because as you mentor others, it helps you to stay focused and helps you to stay very proactive on target with your benchmarking processes and etc. And it encourages you to review your relationships. Review your business plan, goals, objectives quarterly, updating them to their current status, and regroup every 60 to 90 days. Anybody that is usually out there in the world that's doing very high intense jobs will tell you that they have to have time to get away to regroup and restructure their game plan. So you go somewhere where you could do that. Be quiet and uninterrupted and have your creative thought processes in place. And last of all, benchmark your progress. I know you all have different terms now today. This is kind of an old 80s terms. But benchmarking, or whatever process you want to use, that shows where you are, because the donors going to want to know, the funders are going to want to know, and it creates accountability to yourself and to your co-workers and to your management as well. So these steps are valuable in your strategic planning and development. Thank you very much.